This is Aldous Huxley, and these are the sounds of the brave new world, of test tube and decanter, of hissing injectors and gurgling blood substitute. The year is AF 632, 632 years after Ford. We are inside the London Hatchery and Conditioning Centre, and this is the fertilizing room.
What you just heard is what I recorded in 1956. It was for the CBS radio workshop broadcast of my novel Brave New World. The broadcast featured me, Aldous Huxley, as the narrator. Brave New World is set in the year AF 632, 600 years after Henry Ford introduced his auto assembly line and his Model T. In my novel, science and efficiency reign supreme. Brave New World is a world that deifies Henry Ford as our Lord Ford.
Chronology of men and machines. In 1937, a Titan's thugs bloody Walter Reuther. The Titan was Henry Ford. Walter is one of three brothers, Walter, Victor, and Roy. The barbarity happened as the brothers were struggling to organize Henry Ford's workers into a labor union. 4 years later, the brothers succeeded, and Henry Ford signed a contract with United Automobile Workers of America, a labor confederacy representing Ford's 100,000 employees.
Citizens in my dystopian fiction are produced artificially, conditioned to belong to specific castes, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, or epsilon, and taught through hypnopedia sleep learning methods. Themes of individuality, freedom, and the dehumanizing effects of a controlled pleasure-driven culture are explored in this hellscape story of mine. I trace my novel to another novel, and to another man. The man was Samuel Butler, and the novel was Erewhon. Erewhon is an anagram. The word Erewhon is nowhere spelled backwards.
A passage from nowhere follows. There is reason to hope that the machines will use us kindly, for their existence will be in a great measure dependent upon ours. They will rule us with a rod of iron, but they will not eat us. They will not only require our services in the reproduction and education of their young, but also in waiting upon them as servants, in gathering food for them and feeding them, in restoring them to health when they are sick, and in either burying their dead or working up their deceased members into new forms of mechanical existence.
Chronology of men and machines. 1937, the year the Titan's thugs bloodied Walter Reuther. Another Titan, Alan Turing, the father of modern computer science, gave us an algorithm for an artificial intelligent mind. In 1998, the son of a quantum field theory physicist writes a book.
The title of his book was Darwin Among the Machines, The Evolution of Global Intelligence. In his book, Freeman Dyson's son George describes a clash, a decades-long brawl, between Samuel Butler, Charles Darwin, and another man. That other man, the third man in the fracas, was my grandfather Thomas Henry Huxley. Thomas Henry T.H. Huxley is ever known as Charles Darwin's bulldog. Bulldog for his unceasing advocacy of Darwin's theory of evolution. It is his badge. It is a wingman's due. In his 1997 book about evolving canny gadgets and us, George Dyson seizes the eccentric guide Samuel Butler to chart a wet lattice network and a machine mind crisscross. But this guide is no Virgil. Dyson Victorian Scout doesn't show up in a forest savage, rough and stern, squeezed between heaven and hell, but in a brawl in a ring, and ring without guardrails. The ring is Britain. The brawl is with Charles Darwin. And this fracas is managed, so to speak, by my grandfather. This is how George Dyson tells it. Samuel Butler's career was marked by a bitter dispute with Charles Darwin, precipitated by Darwin's failure to adequately credit the work of prior
evolutionists, and one in particular, his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. Butler's criticism of Darwin's incomplete acknowledgments escalated into a sustained attack on the foundations of Charles Darwinism itself. The ensuing controversy consumed 4 volumes of Butler's writings and 20 years of his life. The forces that Darwin and T.H. Huxley marshaled against their religious critics were directed with the same intensity against Butler and Butler's arguments.
The man Henry Ford's thugs beat bloody in 1937, and who rose up and organized the auto workers knew the lines of assembly. He knew quickening automation. He knew what Mr. Henry Ford wrought. Testifying before the United States Congress in 1957, Walter Reuther called this is our trouble. This is our trouble.
This is our trouble.
Our Lord Ford signed the contract. The contract was with the United Automobile Workers of America. 10 years after Henry Ford's promise to recognize the humanity in an assembly line, the United Automobile Workers hired Samuel Guzzardo. Guzzardo's task was to assemble a men and machines curriculum, a syllabus for the labor union's international staff. My novel was not on the Guzzardo reading list, but Samuel Butler's Erewhon was.
They will rule us with a rod of iron, but they will not eat us. But they will not eat us. But they will not eat us. But they will not. But they will not eat us. I fear none of the existing machines. What I fear is the extraordinary rapidity with which they are becoming something very different to what they are at present. No class of beings have in any time past made so rapid a movement forward. Should not that be jealously watched and checked while we can still check it? And is it not necessary for this end to destroy the more advanced of the machines which are in use at present? Some people may say that man's moral influence will suffice to rule them, but I cannot think it will ever be safe to repose much trust in the moral sense of any trust.
Attack on the foundations of Charles Darwinism.
Chronology of Men and Machines. 1957. Push Buttons and People is produced by the UAW Education and Citizenship Department, the department where Samuel Butler's novel, Erewhon, is taught by Samuel Guzzardo. Samuel Guzzardo is my father. Push Buttons and People opens with a disquieting voice.
Machines without human beings. Machines without human beings, that uncanny spectacle is automation. A foreboding, frightening word. A word to send a shudder through a man or a woman or a child.
My grandfather was more than the great man's bulldog and a one-time referee. He was also an engineer of sorts, one who characterized animals and humans as conscious automata. My mindful forefather had 5 daughters and 3 sons. The patriarch's eldest son was Leonard. Leonard was my father. Leonard remarried after my mother died. My father's last child was Andrew. Sir Andrew Huxley had 6 children. His last was Claire. Claire's last was named after my father, Leonard.
Chronology of Men and Machines.
2007. The son of the Samuel who chose Samuel Butler over me makes a video. In the son's moving picture, there is a child in parlour and a portrait on a wall. The child is Leonard Holmes Huxley. The child taps away at a handheld game console. On the wall, the patriarch in a portrait looks on. The rhythmic drumming sounds of my little nephew's fingers are not so unlike those other little throbbing, pounding ones. Throbbing, pounding ones.
Inside the fertilizing room.
Throbbing, pounding ones.
There is reason to hope that the machines will use us kindly, for their existence will be in a great measure dependent upon ours. They will rule us with a rod of iron, but they will not eat us. They will not only require our services in the reproduction and education of their young, but also in waiting upon them as servants, in gathering food for them and feeding them, in restoring them to health when they are sick, and in either burying their dead or working up their deceased members into new forms of mechanical existence.